Where the fuck are we? You said we would make it to the shore.
I said no such thing. I said we would find land.
Dallas and the woman argued as we lugged the raft from the ocean onto the beach. A familiar bittersweet feeling hit me after taking each step on the sandy beach. Never in my wildest dreams would I have been thankful for my feet to feel solid ground. Looking ahead was a dark forest with tall trees that seemed to kiss the starry night sky. Sweet, tangy air came from its direction, almost sweeping me off my feet to enter the lush green void. We finally made it out of the water and collectively fell onto the damp sand.
Blessed Mother Mary,
Louisa shouted as she began making sand angels with her arms and legs. I laughed and joined her in making angels. Bursting from Louisa was a light green hue of utter joy. So used to her perpetual anxious violet, I could barely recognize her as this new mist reverberated around her after every giggle. There was reason to be happy. Hell, even I would be as happy as her under different circumstances. But I shouldn't think about that. I had to keep my wits on something else. Anything else. Nevertheless, I was relieved to be on land rather than the ocean any day, especially after what we endured. I tilted my head up to peer at the raft. Thank you. I hope to never be on any kind of boat, ship, raft, or anything of that nature for as long as I lived.
We're not out of the woods yet, people,
the woman said, reeling us back in. Dallas scoffed.
We know, because you led us to a deserted island.
At least here we have more options than we did out there.
She spat back, then sat up to face us.
We need to create a shelter and start a fire. Mercury and I will gather firewood. Dallas, I assume you can protect Louisa and hold down the fort.
Louisa stopped making her sand angel.
Excuse me. I think it would be best if I went out to gather wood. I think I could find us some edible berries as well.
Very well then.
The woman turned her head to me.
You and Mercury go forage for wood and berries while we set up camp.
Dallas extended his arms and legs, then yawned.
Yeah, whatever, but can we at least take a break now?
I hate to say it, but I'm siding with Dallas here.
I chimed in. The woman snarled.
Fine, take 5, but we get to work right after.
Fine.
We collectively groaned.
Do you think they've killed each other yet?
Louisa giggled.
I would hope not. I don't know where we would be if we lost Dallas.
He's been as useful as a screen door on a submarine.
The both of us laughed as we continued our trek into the semi-dark jungle. Glinting stars still lit the dark sky enough to see where we were going. From the tall trees and shrubbery, you could hear animals moving about and insects chirping as we collected as many dry branches as possible. Louisa stopped ahead of me to rummage through a short tree.
Look what we found.
She gleamed. I walked next to her to see her holding what appeared to be a purple berry of some kind. Next to it were a bundle more.
These berries aren't poisonous, I hope?
I squinted my eyes to make out more details. Louisa yanked one out, then popped it in her mouth.
Not in the slightest. These are mulberries, and they are full of helpful nutrients for a growing boy.
That's all the information I needed to pluck a few and also pop them in my mouth. The berries had a sweet, citrusy flavor to them as they burst between my teeth. A tear formed in my eye as I moaned,
Oh God.
Oh God, indeed.
We gathered as many mulberries we could get our hands on, popping a few into our bellies once in a while. I attempted to grab another hand of berries from a shrub below the tree, but Louisa quickly grabbed my arm.
Not those.
She pulled back my hand.
Those are pokeweed berries. Eat too many of those and you will definitely die.
Gotcha, thanks.
She began rubbing her hand over her belly.
Then again, the difference between poison and medicine is dosage. You know what? Grab a few handfuls of them. Just make sure you separate which pockets hold the edible berries from the poisonous ones.
There was an air of authority in her voice that put a smile on my face. I had never seen Louisa take charge, and until recently raise her voice. Giving it more thought, she had been extremely helpful to our survival. Whether it was coming up with the plan to reach the lifeboat or recognizing the stars and now with the berries, her presence had been astronomically useful. Thinking back, I had always been so cruel and demeaning to her, and for what? Because she and my father accidentally made a baby, she deserved my ridicule. I was ashamed of my behavior towards her. After we gathered as much wood and berries as we could hold, we headed towards the rest of our party. The guilt was eating at me with each step we took.
Louisa, I want to apologize.
I blurted out.
For what, Mercury?
She asked from behind me.
For treating you like shit this last year and a half. I did everything in my power to belittle you and make you feel insignificant because I felt you were trying to trap my father.
There was a pause in the air before she responded.
I wholeheartedly accept your apology, but I guess this is the best time to tell you this.
I stopped walking.
Tell me what?
I turned around to face her. She met me eye to eye.
Ilios was not the father of my child.
My head was in a whirlwind upon hearing that revelation. My mind scrambled as I tried to come up with a response.
But the rumors and whispers Dad never dispelled, that you never dispelled. You two were always together, so everyone just put two and two.
Your father prevented a war from happening.
Louisa interrupted my scattered speech.
A war? What are you getting at?
Louisa's face became stoically serious.
My father is a wealthy liquor vendor with ties to the Spanish mafia. Your father and mine had a very fruitful business relationship, and he wanted me to work under Ilios to learn his side of the business.
She took a deep breath before continuing.
Last year, one of your father's security guards took advantage of me and I was left like this.
Louisa looked down towards her baby bump. I was dumbfounded.
I'm so sorry. I never knew.
She put her hand up.
No apologies needed. I am at peace with what happened. However, my family wanted anything but peace. In our culture, we don't believe in abortion, so this little boy was going to make it whether I liked it or not. Your father handed over the guard for us to deal with, but it still wasn't enough for my family.
Louisa paused, then took another breath.
My father wanted a recompense that equaled what happened to me.
Well, what was the recompense?
My lips quivered in angst, unsure if I even wanted to know the answer. Louisa lifted her hand and pointed her finger at me.
You.
Me?
Louisa put her hand on her belly, yet still stared at me unflinchingly.
Equivalent exchange. Those were the exact words my father used when he demanded you as repayment. Ilios could not bear the thought of using his daughter to repay the toll. However, my father felt otherwise because he claimed it was only fair. My father threatened to use his connections with the mafia to destroy Ilios' empire, but your father had another idea. He agreed to raise the baby as his own and support me through and through. My father begrudgingly accepted those terms, and the ashes of war were quelled. For that, I am forever grateful to your father, Mercury Angelopoulos.
Everything hit me like a tidal wave. I had no idea something this catastrophic took place under my nose. Bruno was let go for seemingly no reason, only to now find out that his crime was this heinous. And then there was Dad. Dad was stuck between using me as a bargaining chip and his pristine reputation, so he made a decision that he thought would please all sides. He took all of the ridicule and blowback from not just the press but from me as well. His ungrateful, spiteful daughter. My stomach churned as my guilt continued to boil.
Well,
Louisa began.
We should get back to the others. I feel so much lighter on my feet finally unloading that baggage.
Louisa cheerfully continued ahead of me, and I stood for a second before following her back to the group. As for myself, the gravity of the guilt anchored to my consciousness weighed me down more than I could have ever imagined. Dallas and the woman assembled a makeshift bungalow under a nearby tree using some of our clothes. We gathered all of our resources together, and she used the dry wood and leaves to spark a fire with 2 flat rocks the woman found. The warmth from the smoldering fire put a calm in the brisk air as we knelt around it. Dancing embers cradled in the pit put me in a trance as I thought about everything that had transpired. Dad, the painting, the pirates, even what Louisa revealed. My mind raced with thoughts on what could have been. If only I had known everything earlier.
We'll keep the fire alive in shifts.
The woman ordered.
Everyone rest and I'll take first watch.
Yes, ma'am.
Sure.
Will do.
I took off my tattered turtleneck and fashioned it into a pillow, laid down, and attempted to fall asleep. My thoughts kept me awake for a few hours until my eyes finally closed.
Ow, ow.
Something was pinching my forehead. The pain woke me up to see myself eye to eye with a king crab playing Operation on my face.
Ah.
I yelped as I quickly sat up. The tenacious creature was still clamped to my forehead before I gave it a good yank. I gently tossed the crab to the ground and watched it crawl away.
Fucking hell.
I gasped. It was early morning, and I looked down to see both Dallas and Louisa sleeping soundly, but the woman was gone and the fire was out. I turned my head back and forth, looking for any sign of her. Panic enveloped my body as my heart raced. Where did she go? Did she abandon us? I spun my head towards the raft to see it still sitting where we parked it last night. From the corner of my eye, there was someone near the foot of the beach. I strained my eyes to see the woman sitting near the edge of the beach, letting water cascade over her feet. Phew. Thank the heavens. I dusted the sand off my turtleneck and put it back on, then walked towards her. As I was approaching, I noticed that she was quietly humming something, a tune of some sort, a very familiar tune at that. On her face, she looked to be lost in thought as she gazed towards the ocean, arms resting on her knees. She did not react when I sat next to her and joined her in ocean gazing. There were a few seconds of awkward silence as she continued to hum.
Are you humming the latest Rihanna hit?
I blurted out. She didn't respond, still staring out into the glittering blue void, serenading the air with the upbeat tune. I smiled.
You stood up all night keeping the fire alive. How kind of you.
She immediately stopped humming.
Please. If I would have left it up to one of you, we would have frozen to death.
Sure. Just admit that you care about us. Maybe just a little.
I continued to playfully chastise. She quickly turned her head to me.
I admit no such thing. I simply realized that only I could do the job.
There was a slight hue of pink within her perpetual crimson.
Sure.
Whatever.
She spun her head back to the ocean.
Anyways, I'm glad you're up. Let's find breakfast before Louisa and uselessness wakes up.
Before she could stand, I had to ask.
Do you ever think about your husband?
My husband?
I gave her a quizzical look.
Yes, your husband, Kenny. He was killed on the ship. Don't you think about him?
The woman rested her hands on her knee.
At times, but I can't let it distract me.
Distract you from what?
Surviving.
She quickly answered. The curtness of her response took me by surprise, but it kind of made me have a little more respect for her. She was laser-focused on our survival and never seemed to buck under pressure.
I wish I could be like you.
I played with my white strands of hair.
The sight of my father dying the way he did constantly haunts me.
Loss is the burden of living life. Only those who die young or live without attachments can escape that burden. So appreciate your loved ones while they are in your arms.
Wow,
I spun my head to her.
that was something I did not expect from you.
A smile slipped onto her face.
I am full of surprises.
I let out a giggle, then immediately returned to thinking of Dad. I turned back to the ocean.
Can I tell you something?
What's that?
I paused and took a breath, wondering if I should reveal my deepest insecurity, but let it out anyway.
I have a condition where my senses blend with one another called synesthesia. Basically, sounds emitting colors.
The woman remained stoic.
I am aware of the condition.
When people talk, I interpret the colors they emit into emotions, and I always believe my father used that knowledge to help him make business deals. I deluded myself into thinking that I was the reason he was successful, that I was the one in control. But I have always known in my heart that that wasn't the case.
The woman turned her body to me to show that I had her full attention. I continued.
The colors and emotions I see are just my own perceptions, not the reality. My own deluded reality. It's one of the reasons I studied psychology, so I could better understand people to make informed, educated guesses.
The woman grunted.
Interesting.
So, I'm telling you this because I want your opinion on something.
I took another long breath.
Why would my father, as brilliant and logical as he was, entertain my input?
She scoffed.
That's easy, because he was a kind man that loved you and wanted to spend time with you.
Her words hit me like a Mack truck. I blinked away the tears forming in my eyes as I processed each syllable that she uttered. She stood up to her feet, but I continued sitting on the warm morning sand.
Time is a precious resource, especially to men with wealth and power. How a man chooses to use that time dictates what he values most. The fact that your father shared something so valuable with you should answer your question, Mercury.
I could hear a deep breath coming from her.
A father who loves you unconditionally.
I turned my head and looked up at her.
What is your father like? You frequently bring him up, especially when you're upset, or at least when I perceive you as upset.
It was subtle, but I noticed a slight frown form on her face as she reached for her right shoulder, giving it a quick grab before putting her hand back to her side. Almost immediately, her face went back to its usual stoic nature. She turned around and began walking.
Come, Mercury!
She barked.
Let's find breakfast.
At least tell me your name.
My eyes were still locked onto her backside.
We've been calling you either ma'am or hey you.
The crunching of the sand halted as she stopped walking.
You and your friends can call me whatever you like. Now let's get a move on.
For some reason, her answer didn't surprise me in the slightest. I leapt up and followed her lead.
Catch it! Catch it!
The woman chased after me as I chased after the wild boar. We spotted this bad boy an hour ago and stalked it until my empty stomach sounded the alarm. Ever since then, we had to play catch with the squealing boar, and it was definitely winning. The beast raced past protruding vines and tree stumps, and I tried my best to keep up with the spry animal. Adrenaline coursed through me as I continued to tail the wild boar. There was no way I was going to let it out of my sight. Suddenly, the boar lunged into a bush and I haphazardly jumped right after it, landing into a mud pit. The thick mud sloshed into my mouth as I tried to swing my arms out and upward until I realized something. My feet couldn't feel the ground. I looked to my left to see the swine squealing in agony as its body slowly sank into the mud. Oh fuck.
Hey,
I shouted frantically.
help me, help me.
The woman popped out of the bush I came from and slid to a stop before she too could be caught in the trap. She got down to a squat and gave me a devious smile.
Well,
She chided.
looks like we got ourselves into a sticky situation.
Haha, very funny.
I extended my muddied hand towards her.
Pull me up.
She looked at my hand, then back to me as I could feel my body slowly sinking into the pit. The woman could easily grab my whole arm and yank me out, but she stood where she was. She smiled.
Do you have the boar?
Rage almost blinded me as my body inched deeper.
What? No, of course not. Pull me up, now.
She stood up from her squat and looked down at me.
Unless you have that boar, I'm not helping you up.
My torso was almost fully submerged.
Are you fucking kidding me?
Do I look like the kidding type?
This woman was dead serious, and I did not have time to bargain with her. I looked to my left to see that the boar was fully submerged, and I had no choice but to join him. I took a deep breath, closed my eyes, then plunged the rest of my body into the pit. The mud was so viscous that it pained my damaged shoulder when I sifted around for the boar. After a seeming eternity, I grabbed what felt like a hoof, then pulled it closer to me. I tried to swim back up to the surface with it, but my body continued to sink. Only my fingers could reach the surface as I felt my chest wanting to explode. Before my body could go limp, a strong grip grabbed my arm and yanked my body up and out of the pit with the boar in tow. I tried opening my eyes to make out the woman barely straining to pull us up. We finally made it onto solid ground, and I coughed up some of the mud I swallowed. I wiped the mud from my face to see that I was completely covered in the thick substance from head to toe. I turned to the woman to notice her devious smile creep out again.
You're a fucking cunt.
I screamed.
And you a warrior.
She went to check on the boar.
The prim, pretty princess, christened by not-so-holy water. My father would have awarded you a double green for that feat of bravery.
I still seethed.
Shut the fuck up.
She laughed as she held the now dead boar by the tusks.
Let's go get you and breakfast here cleaned.